Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you. Featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
This has been brought to you by Megger, a company that has been serving the electrical test and measurement industry for over 100 years.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Today we have a very interesting guest. His name is Ed Evarts. He's an author, a speaker, and a leadership coach with extensive experience in innovative leadership and management. You know, Ed possesses the ability to build awareness, create action, and deliver results. There's so much more that I can tell you about him, but I want him to tell you more about himself because who knows himself better than Ed. So welcome to the Susan Brender Show, Ed Evarts.
Thank you, Susan. It's great to be here.
You know, Ed, you've written a new book, and it's called Raise Your Visibility and Value, Uncover the Lost Art of Connecting on the Job. You know, today we live in a society where there is so much, everything is, I should say it this way, everything is centered around technology. People don't seem to be able to have a face-to-face kind of talk. They don't even want to do that. Now, is your book talking a little bit about that? And if not, tell us what it's all about.
So it does talk about the impact of technology, and what I have found through my own career and the experiences of my clients is that it is not helping them be more visible and add more value in their organization. So these days of Twitter and LinkedIn and glass offices and cubicles, et cetera, are all created to help people get better connected, are not helping people raise their visibility and value. And so through my own experiences in corporate America and then through the experiences of my clients, decided to take the ideas and suggestions and recommendations and experiences that so many people were having and put them together in a book. And the book is really designed to share this information with more people than I could ever connect with live, one-on-one.
Sure. No, it's clearly understood. You know, I'll change the subject just for a second because I just heard this on CNBC. They were talking about Twitter. They said Twitter now is 44% ahead of itself from the days before. That's 44% more of people doing Twitter because of the president, believe it or not. And they said that also Facebook is going down because now all the people are finding different ways or platforms to kind of communicate on. Is that unbelievable? I mean, why would anybody want to talk on Twitter or Facebook about their personal life or the things that really should concern them? Why? What's going on here?
Well, you know, I think part of it might be, and I'm not a sociologist or a psychologist, so I can't testify that this is accurate, but as the father of a 20-year-old daughter, she grew up with technology, and today she is more likely to connect with her colleagues and friends via Twitter and Facebook and Instagram than pick up the phone and call them. And oftentimes she'll come to us because she has read something in Twitter or Facebook that has had a negative impact on her. And my wife and I would always say to her, pick up the phone and call your friend and get a clarification and talk it through. I'm sure it's not what they meant, et cetera. And she looks at us like we have six heads. Like, what are you talking about? What do you mean pick up the phone and call somebody? So I think it's the world that they have been brought up in. And in the book, I talk about change in a couple of ways. One, the pace of change. So the speed of change happening continues to increase, and it's faster and faster and faster. And I'm sure you've heard statistics around, you know, how long it was for 1 million people to have a TV, which took decades, and how long it took 1 million people to have an iPhone, which took days, right? So the change is just happening faster and faster. And then the frequency of change, the frequency of things coming up in the workplace that are changing are speeding up as well. So there's more change happening, and the changes are happening faster.
Wow. Okay, let's get a little more involved here. So you're with a company called Excellius. Okay, give us a definition of leadership development.
Yeah, that's not an easy question because so many people have so many different definitions. And, for me, leadership development is what's right for a particular person at a particular time. Culture of a company plays a huge role in how somebody should operate to be a great leader. Companies that welcome suggestions and want people to get involved, oppressive, and don't want people to participate and get involved. So the culture that somebody's currently in, which will change from time to time, is extremely important. And then their own style and biases and preferences and interests also define what makes a great leader. So it varies dramatically from person to person based on who they are, what their objectives are, and the culture that they're in. A couple of qualities that I think most of the models or people would tell you are important include trust, and it's ensuring that you can create trust with people that you work with, whether it's a peer, a boss, or a subordinate, and also clarity, that regardless of what you're saying, whether it's good news or bad news, trying to convey.
You started to talk about the values, trust, words like that, when you spoke about the kind of involvement that somebody has in their company. It's so important, as you said, to have a lot of trust. Finish that statement for me, and let's talk a little bit about the importance of things like trust and various other things that you talked about before.
Sure. So when you look at leadership development models, there are a couple of components that I think are very consistent in their existence in these models, and one of them is trust and the need to build and create trust with bosses and subordinates and peers, people that you work with equally. And then the other area is clarity, and it's ensuring that what you say and how you say it is understood by all, whether what you're saying is good news or bad news. It needs to be clearly communicated on a recurring basis.
Yeah. What challenges are business professionals facing in the workplace today? We talked all about technology, certainly, and that's a challenge, but there must be other things that you consider the real challenges.
So, in the book we talk about a number of challenges that people experience. One of them is something we've already talked about, which is the pace and frequency of change. Busy is the new corporate buzzword. If you ask somebody how things are going, they're going to say busy, right? Oh, I'm so busy. So, people believe that they are very, very busy in their workplaces, whether they are or aren't, and that's largely driven by the environment that they're in. Any of my Outlook calendars on their desk, and they'll show me, any particular day, and there are 2 or 3 meetings all scheduled at the same time. And, it's hard to be in 2 or 3 places at once.
And I'm going to tell you a story. I don't know whether it's apples and oranges, but I think it's very important to what we're discussing right now. I remember a long time ago I was reading the New York Times, and somebody said in the New York Times that she was the vice president of a bank. And she loved her job, and she did a lot of different things, and she did studies, which cost her a fortune, or cost the company a fortune. And she decided when they bought her out that she would give the new person who was taking her position the report that she studied and that she worked on for, hours and hours and hours, costing about $250,000. Lo and behold, she went to the marketing person who took over her job, and she said to him, here, I did a study. I think it's really important that you have it, and I'm pleased to give it to you. And you know what he said? He said, I'm so sorry. I'm so busy. I can't have the time to read it. He walked into the room, and he shredded it. Can you believe that?
No, I can't believe that. Well, I sort of can believe it based on experiences that I hear from my clients, but I can't believe that he was that short-sighted.
Yeah. People today, what are the risks for business professionals facing in the workplace? I mean, I have a suspicion there are a lot of risks today because, everybody's a little uncomfortable. There's not that sense of belonging. That's not the sense of a company being like your family. So tell us about the risks, if you will.
Sure. And a lot of the risks aren't necessarily new risks, but they're just more prevalent because the business world is changing faster and faster and faster. And, there was a time where somebody might have joined a company like IBM and stayed there for 40 or 50 years, and they started in the mailroom and they left as an executive vice president, and they were always at one company, and people honored and thought that was fantastic. And today, if you're at a company more than 4 or 5 years, people think you're crazy. Why did you stay there that long, and how come you didn't move around? So, the pace and the frequency of the workplace is changing how people interact with the workplace, and it creates risk for people. There's risk around getting picked if there's a realignment or a reduction in staff, that if you're not visible and people don't know the value that you can provide, that you're at risk of getting laid off. Or
right.
terminated, from your employment, et cetera. There's risk of not getting picked.
Mm-hmm. Are people driven by money, or are they driven by the fact that they would like to have the power of being, say, a VP or even the president? I mean, what drives people in the workplace today?
Yeah, the people that I work with, so as I mentioned earlier, I'm not a sociologist or psychologist, so I've not studied, why people work, but I could tell you for my own preferences and the clients that I've worked with, most of them are working. They want to ensure they're treated fairly, so they want to ensure their pay and the benefits that they receive are competitive in the marketplace, but mostly they're looking to work in order to make a difference, that they want to ensure how the company was when they started is different than how they left in a positive way. Again, they need to ensure their compensation's fair, and of course they're working for money. Nobody typically works for free unless you're part of a volunteer organization, but most people need an income, but they mostly want to ensure whatever income they're getting is fair. What they're working for is to make a difference.
Yeah. You mentioned IBM before, and you were talking about a company that was truly a family. My brother, I'll be honest with you, my brother and sister-in-law worked for IBM for 37 years. And at that
there you
time,
go.
Oh, let me tell you, they loved their company. It was a part of their life. It was a part of their family. They were treated so great, and they made decent money. But the thing is, today, if you try to get in touch with somebody from IBM, just as an example, you find that it's almost impossible. Almost impossible, because there's no connection to the marketing person. There's no connection to anybody in the company, and it's just a whole different thing. And they're not working out of their own offices now; they're working out of their own houses. How has that affected the visibility and value of a person?
So that's a really, really insightful observation, because we have slowly transpired from an organizational world where companies took care of employees to an organizational world where employees are on their own. And people and organizations are not taking care of, so to speak, people in respect to employment. And I look at it as more of a contractor world where you're hired to do a job, and when the job is done or completed, you either move on to something else or you leave, but you don't stay for like your family members for 37 or 40 years. And so, this change, and it's been very subtle. No one ever announced it, saying, hey, we're no longer going to be looking out for employees. You're now in it for yourself, but it requires you to take more of a lead in your career. And when I speak with clients, I talk about it as, moving from the passenger seat to the driver's seat, that you need to be a driver of your career, and you need to be in control of what your next steps are and where you want to go and what you want to do. And one of the ways to do that is to be as visible as you can within your organization and industry, and ensure if you are visible that you are providing as much value that you can provide as an employee. And those that are more visible and are providing more value are going to be more drivers of their career than those that aren't visible and aren't adding any value and are just going along for the ride.
Yeah. Are visibility and value mutually exclusive?
They're not. I was speaking with a client yesterday about his former boss, and, I asked what the status of his former boss was, and he kind of laughed, and I said, why are you laughing? And he goes, well, this person moved on to a new role in the organization, and everybody knows who this person is, but nobody knows what they're doing. And so this person is highly visible within their organization, but their value that they're providing is very, very unclear. So, unless you work the two together, and unless you work to be more visible within your organization and industry, and also look for ways to tie yourself to what your entity considers as valuable, you're going to be that person who everybody knows, but nobody knows what you do, or a person who provides great value, but nobody knows it because nobody knows who you are.
I'm interested in this, Ed. It's, when I think about the past and I think about getting jobs, what was sort of necessary was that you had a college degree, you had a master's degree. Now today, there are a lot of smart people out there, and the fact is, sometimes they don't have the master's degree or the PhD, just maybe a bachelor's. Is that the requirement for today, or has that changed? And I'd like to know also the changes that have happened in the industries, because things are so different. They seem so different. And I want very practical kinds of advice from you for our audience. I think that it would be really important to give them an understanding of what they need, what is the best way for them to get the best job. So go on. Let's hear what you think.
Sure, yeah. I'm happy to share with you what my observations are. To be candid, that's not an area in respect to raise your visibility and value that I've done a ton of research on in respect to what qualifications or requirements are needed in order to be successful. Yet I would tell you that my observation in my own corporate experience, being in human resources and in working with my clients, that the number one differentiator you can have as a contributor is work experience. And the emphasis that has been put in the past in respect to getting an MBA or a PhD, et cetera, is diminishing a little bit, because people want to know that you can provide them value at their workplace, and most value comes from experience and knowing which decisions to make or which options to have, and how to navigate through those options, so the outcome that you're working on is more aligned with what the organization is looking for. So, people who are in school forever, and of course we want medical professionals and people like that to go to school a lot because of what type of work that they do, but others need to balance education with experience, because oftentimes folks with really good experience, even if they don't have the education that others have, may prevail because they can bring things to the job that somebody who's not worked can't.
Let's go back to your book for a second. So now you're saying that, your book just really talks about the issues of visibility and value. You keep on using that word value, which I think is really a very important thing. So would you tell us more about business value tied to the internal financial drivers?
Yeah, so, in my book, I spend, about a third of the book on value. And value really is the new corporate currency. When you listen to recruiters, when you listen to hiring managers, when you listen to people talk about organization, oftentimes they will use the word value when describing what they do and how they provide differences in their organization. And for me, value has a million different definitions, and so I made a decision as I was doing this work to pick one definition, and so I have tied value to financial metrics. And I believe people at organizations who are looking to add more value to their organization need to understand what financial metrics are important to their organization, and then do whatever they can to tie themselves to them in order to have a positive influence on them. And so you can listen to board of directors calls, or if your organization's publicly held and does a quarterly Wall Street call, you can listen at employee meetings, you can do interviews with key stakeholders, whatever it might be. You need to know and identify what the financial metrics are that are important to your organization, and then work with your boss to tie yourself to them as deeply as you can. And in that particular definition, success will be based on your ability to have a positive influence on the financial metrics that are important to your organization.
And the external? What about that?
Yeah, so, I look at it a little bit like a pyramid, and at the bottom there is internal individual value, and in the middle there's the internal financial metrics that we just talked about, and then at the top there's external marketplace metrics. And so these, and the reason it's a pyramid is because fewer people can influence or have an impact on external marketplace factors as they impact an organization. So those are external influence that affect the value of an organization, and it may be the price of raw materials, it might be insurance rates, things of that nature that are a little bit tougher to influence, but still have an impact on your organization.
All right, so let's go back for a second. And if a person just graduated the university and they're not really that experienced, they've done very little before, that gives them the sense that they know a lot about how things work. So set the stage for me. A young adult graduates the university, and they decide that they want to be of value and they want to be visible in their company. How does it all begin? How does it start? What advice do you give them?
Yeah, well, that's a great time to start this effort when you're first starting at an organization, because you want to have a really positive impact on the company or organization you're going to work at. And so, I would suggest a couple of things for this particular person. One is to ensure at some point in time, not right off, but, like 90, 120 days in, to find time to speak with your boss about how you can add value to the organization. Performance appraisals are done in most companies. They're slowly dying in respect to their impact. They have been for some time. But, it's now becoming more and more apparent that the performance appraisal system that we covet in the U.S. isn't having the influence and impact that we thought. And that's where value really comes in. I would much rather ensure that all my employees were adding value to the organization than, hitting particular, self-created goals and objectives, et cetera. So finding time to speak with your boss to identify what type of value you can provide is extremely important. And part of that is because job descriptions and job profiles and ads, et cetera, don't talk about value as you can provide it in the organization. It mostly talks about tasks and activities you should work on in order to be successful, but it doesn't talk about how you can be valuable. So I think having this conversation would be extremely important. And then in the book, we also have a worksheet you can do where you can ensure either assignments that you're working on upcoming or currently are being attached to the financial metrics that we talked about earlier. So if I'm given a project to work on, how can I ensure and how can I look at it in a way that I can describe it as it influences the financial metrics of the organization? Because if I can demonstrate that it's going to have a positive impact on the financial metrics of the organization, the attention it will get and the success I will feel when it goes well will be greater than it would have been if I didn't do that.
Yeah. Sometimes it's really a question of a person's attitude. Some people have a really good attitude and they say, whatever happens, whatever I can do, anything I can change, I'll do it. And then there are people who say, this institution that I'm working for doesn't give a darn about me, and I'm just going to do what I have to do and leave when I have to leave. What kind of attitudes do you think that you've seen before that reflect this whole notion that, the world is a different world, workplace is a different place, because the issue is the issue of trust. Can they trust the company that they work for, that they'll be able to stay there for a few years? I mean, what's the story about today's world? And we're going to end on this because I think if you give people the sense that they could understand more about everything that works in the workplace, that would be really fantastic.
Sure. Well, I think to use a platitude, attitude is everything. And I think regardless of where technology takes us and the pace of change that we experience and the degree of visibility or value you have in your organization and industry, having a good, positive attitude is critical. We talk about it in the book, but I would tell you that for folks that I work with, there are two qualities that pertain to attitude that I think are incredibly important. One is optimism, that you have to maintain a positive sense of optimism of what you're doing and how you're doing it. And if your optimism is starting to erode, looking for ways to improve it. And then persistence, that you need to keep at it. And you can't hit one roadblock and figure the game's over and end and leave. But, how do we keep going and be persistent in what we're doing in order to achieve success? So attitude is incredibly important. It's a huge positive energy booster in the workplace, and something everybody who's listening should ensure that they have. And if they don't have it, find a way to get it. It might mean leaving where they are. It might mean finding an accountability partner who can help them. But, you've got to ensure that you've got a good, positive attitude.
And maybe they have to read your book, because
they should read the book, absolutely.
That's right, and it'll give them a ton of information. I can't leave yet, Ed, without asking you about the difference between a man and a woman in the workplace. Has that changed? Because there were a lot of biases. There was this glass ceiling. There were all kinds of things that women had to deal with. But today, how is it? Is it different than before?
Well, I think it is certainly changing. I don't think it's changing as quickly as people would have liked it to change. When they do studies, for example, I live in the Boston area, when they do studies of boards of directors and leaders that are comprised either by male or female, the number of female leaders is still low, right? So it's still not where people expect it to be, even though I think statistically 51% of college graduates or plus are female, right? So a larger number of females are graduating from colleges beyond male, and yet the predominant roles in organizations are still held by males. So it's a huge sociological transition that we need to go through. Certainly it's heightened this year with all of the activity that we've heard and have seen, that most of us would say, hey, it's about time that we put this under the spotlight and this type of behavior had ended. Both men and women need to work hard to raise their visibility and value in the workplace. And the book, which is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, is designed to help everyone be more visible and add more value, both in their organization as well as their industry.
Well, I know that I just said that I want to leave the audience with the last question, but you know what? There is one more thing that I think is an important thing for people. Tell us, Ed, should somebody go to the military? Is that a great place to get experience and to be able to move into a job that really they'll have all the experience they need? Because we have a lot of people coming back from the military and they just don't know what to do. But they have a great deal of experience. So any thoughts about this?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And, my thoughts are that, we have not yet figured out the magic formula to integrate former military professionals into the workplace. And part of the reason for that is in the military, if you walk up to somebody who is of a lower rank and say, drop and give me 20, they do, because that's how the military works. In the workplace, if you walk up to an employee and say, drop and give me 20, they're going to look at you like you've got 6 heads and say, no, I'm not going to do that. And military folks have a hard time, in some cases, not all, transitioning to that and transitioning from a world where hierarchy ruled to a world where hierarchy is not ruling. And so we've got to figure that out, because certainly I know, and I'm sure just dozens of great military leaders and contributors who can make great impacts in organizations, and yet we haven't figured out the magic on how to make that happen.
Yeah. Well, my guest today has been Ed Evarts. Now, he's known for his business acumen, his ability to resolve complex human relations issues, and his genuine and responsive style. Ed has partnered with many managers, leaders, and business teams to explore clarity and communication and to traverse the conflict and change. So, Ed Evarts, very interesting discussion with you. And again, I want you to tell people about where to get your books? Do you have a website? Is there some way that they can speak to you about what you think is a very innovative leadership?
Sure, yeah. My book, again, is Raise Your Visibility and Value, and it's available on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. You can reach me at my website, which is excellius.com, EXCELLIUS.com, and at the top there's a link to Raise Your Visibility and Value, which has information regarding speaking and training that I do on this topic to help groups actually identify for themselves how they can raise their visibility and provide more value. So those are two great ways to reach out.
Well, Ed Evarts, it's been a pleasure having you on the Susan Brender Show. I hope you'll come back. Boy, have you given us a lot of information, education. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Susan. It's been great speaking with you today.
This show is brought to you by the Spectrum Firm Incorporated, a helping hand on the FCC highway. The Spectrum Firm specializes in FCC licensing, related engineering, and project management support in the private wireless industry. We offer FCC licensing, engineering support, and related services, including annual programs for license maintenance and renewal services, spectrum analysis, strategy, and frequency management. For more information, call 858-484-8502 at www.thespectrumfirm.com.
Thank you for listening to The Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.